All right, man, let's talk about the best and the worst draft pick for the Detroit Pistons in the last 10 years. Motor City Sports Talk, me in the building. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, bell icon button, share the video. And, I know the air conditioner going in the back, but it's a hot one. It's like 90 degrees today in the D, so hopefully you can excuse that. But, yeah, we got a lot of candidates for miss, and we got a few candidates for hit as a draft, the best draftee from 2010 to 2019. So let's get into it, man. And I think, as far as worst draft picks, I'm not even going to include the second round picks, like that. I mean, obviously we had some terrible ones, and you can probably filter through any draft and say, oh, this guy, they took this guy over that guy, this, that, and the third. But let's kind of just hone in on the worst draft pick first. And obviously you go to a couple of guys. Henry Ellison, who just retired and just didn't have a career coming out of Marquette, rings a bell. I mean, you can't really judge Luke, Bruce, Diombo yet, but Ellison, you definitely can judge him. Stanley Johnson, you can judge him. And the reason I say I'm not really, going through the second round picks is because, in the second round, rarely do you see guys hit. You had Monte Ellis, you had Draymond Green, Isaiah Thomas almost was the last pick, if not the last pick in a draft one year, and he had some great years. You got a lot of, usually pedestrian players that go in the second round. So, at the end of the day, it's hit or miss once you get outside the lottery in the NBA. And that's how the NBA been for a long time. It just hasn't been as talent rich as NFL, has been. But when you talk about the worst ones, instantly I just point to Henry Ellison and I point to Stanley Johnson. Some people may, try to throw Greg Monroe in there. I mean, there are some other guys that we'll get to, but I'm kind of just looking at Ellison and Stanley Johnson. And one of the reasons that I'm kind of favoring Stanley Johnson as the worst draft pick of the decade is because, once again, some of the dudes that went after him, Justice Winslow, Devin Booker that year, they went on to have decent careers. Stanley Johnson can't even get on the floor in the NBA no more. And Dwayne Casey was supposed to, turn him into what Pascal Siakam was. He was supposed to turn him into this DeMar DeRozan type of guy. There was a lot of hoopla about Dwayne Casey developing Stanley Johnson and his ability to defend. And he had a little bright spot defending LeBron early in the decade in the playoffs. And he just really never materialized. You know what I'm saying? He just never formed the outside shot. He never, patterned his game the way it should have been patterned. He didn't even become a Bruce Bowen type of guy or Ruben Patterson or Tony Allen, who had great defense and just had subpar offense that was good enough to get by. And now he's on the verge of being out the league, maybe not retiring, but being out the league. He hanging on the end of the bench, and maybe that has something to do with his mother passing, and maybe he never recovered from that. But like I said, man, I think he's the worst draft pick of the last decade. I mean, you also got guys like KCP who didn't live up to the whole hype. Also, you had Brandon Knight who didn't live up to the hype. Kyle Slinger, he a second-round pick, but he was garbage. We knew that from the beginning. Greg Monroe, he played well for a minute, but ultimately, when he started getting injured, he already wasn't athletic enough. But some people would say Henry Ellison, but he was like the 20-something pick in the draft, okay? Or 18 or whatever he was. So, personally, I'm going to go with Stanley Johnson just because he was a higher lottery pick, or he was a lottery pick, and, we passed up on some solid talent, to get him, man. You know what I'm saying? So, he definitely disappointed. He showed some potential at Arizona, but I kind of put him in that Marvin Williams category, where when Marvin Williams came out, he was a sixth man in North Carolina. And, people were just saying his potential, and he never reached his potential. Nowhere close to reaching his potential in his league. And I kind of put Stanley Johnson at that point. Now, could he turn it around? Yeah. But to me, Stanley Johnson in a close second will be Henry Ellison. And the only reason I put Stanley over Henry is because he was drafted a lot higher than Henry Ellison. And then you talk about the best picks. I think it boiled down to three guys. I think it boiled down to Andre Drummond, Chris Middleton, and Spencer Dinwiddie. Now, Spencer Dinwiddie was a good player. He can come back to Detroit and become the best draft pick. All three of them have now moved on. Spencer moved on to Brooklyn. Dre moved on to Cleveland. and then you had Chris Middleton move on to Milwaukee, which I believe if they kept all three of them together, I think they would have more success than what they had with Blake Griffin, all right, and some of the other guys they brought in. So I thought they would have been a nice, they would have been nice together. Dinwiddie would have been able to get the most out of Drummond. Dinwiddie and Middleton would have been a nice, long defensive backcourt. So I think not keeping them together longer was a huge mistake. But Dinwiddie would be my first one out the three. He hasn't made an all-star team yet, and he hasn't really started somewhere consistently. So that's kind of been the thing with him. But once he gets to start, he can easily shoot up and be the best. Middleton, I just think he's the second right now. What he bring it to the table in Milwaukee, a good 3-and-D guy, good mid-range guy. I mean, I just think he's second right now. And also you got to think about what they've done for the Pistons as well, too. And Middleton didn't get an opportunity, or did what he didn't get that opportunity to produce for the Pistons for the way that we all wish they could have. And they would have got that opportunity. We could have been in a position where, we might be one or two young pieces away from getting the job done. I mean, imagine if they keep them two together, or at least they take Devin Booker, or at least they take Giannis. Then we talking about we competing for a championship right now, easily. But hey, we had the right guys in place. We've been in positions to take the Kawhis, the Paul Georges, the Giannis's, and the Rudy Gobert. We just haven't been able to evaluate talent. Donovan Mitchell over Luke Kennard. That's one of the worst misses out there. So, one thing about some of these Detroit teams, the Lions and Pistons in particular, they like to have their own, prototype for a player. And great players come in all shapes, sizes, and their games are different. But as long as they're productive in their own special way, you should value them. But Spencer Dinwiddie would be my first guy out the three out. Then Chris Middleton. And I think it's undeniably, I think a lot of people are going to agree, I think Andre Drummond was the best pick of the decade. Obviously, he gave us a lot of 2020 games. He stayed the longest. He became an all-star in Detroit, I think 1 or 2 times, rebounding well. But he had the most impact in Detroit. And obviously he had the most opportunities to do so. The other two we mentioned didn't get that opportunity to do what they needed to do in Detroit. But undeniably, Andre Drummond was the best pick in the 2010s. And not to say that's a bad thing, you know what I'm saying? I think it was a good thing, but I just think a few misses on Booker or Giannis or Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell, Andre Drummond probably would have became an all-star with the right facilitator and the right people around him, a perennial all-star. And I just think it would have elevated his game. He'd have been more motivated to win if he would have been in a position to win. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Drummond could have been a lot better draft pick. He may not necessarily been a shining draft pick had they picked some of those guys instead of some of the sorry guys they did end up picking. But undeniably, I think we all can agree Andre Drummond was the best draft pick in the 2010s decade. But the worst to me might be debatable. We're going to have some people say Henry Ellison. But I think Stanley Johnson was the worst. But it was a lot of ride and die Stanley Johnson fans to the day he got moved for Thon Maker. It was a lot of dudes riding and die for Stanley Johnson. To this day, people still in Detroit believe Stanley Johnson got a chance to be an all-star, even though he hanging on at the end of somebody's bench right now. Was it Toronto? He was in New Orleans. Even though he hanging on the end of somebody's bench, somebody in Detroit still believe in him. I don't know what it is. Was it losing his mother, or was it the money, or whatever? But I just don't think, I don't think he motivated enough to work on his game to be an NBA player. Maybe on the street in the YMCA he could shoot the rock, but some other guys. People may say throw KCP in the conversation. Some of those second round picks may be in the conversation. A lot of people gonna put in the conversation who he should have took instead of who he took as one of the reasons why it's the worst draft pick. You're gonna get some Luke Kennard, some Donovan Mitchell talk. You're gonna get some KCP, Giannis, Rudy Gobert talk. Obviously you're gonna get Stanley Johnson, Devin Booker talk. So personally, let me know who you guys think who was the worst overall draft pick for the Pistons last decade and who was the best overall draft pick. And obviously Diambo and Bruce Brown, we still yet to see about what they're going to become in this league. But hey, it's Motor City Sports Talk. Don't forget me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can reach out if you got business, question, inquiry, sponsorship, or video requests. Keep sharing the videos. Best way to reach out to me. It's Twitter, then Instagram. It's Twitter, Facebook, then Instagram. Want to make a donation, Cash App, PayPal in the description. Appreciate everybody for donating. Motor City Sports Talk, one time for the one time. Let me know what you got.